Hello and welcome to The Drum. I'm Tim Palmer. Coming up today, will the Arizona shooting rampage change the tone of political debate in America? The US government uses Twitter in its legal pursuit of WikiLeaks. And should Australians using IVF be allowed to select the gender of their child? Our panel tonight, Conor Duffy from 7:30 Report, Liberal New South Wales MP Prue Goward, and blogger and author Antony Loewenstein. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, first to the shooting tragedy in Arizona and the potential political fallout in the United States. A 22-year-old man has been charged over the rampage in Tucson, which left 6 people dead and others, including Democrat Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords, seriously injured. The attack has left the nation reeling and prompted a fresh debate over the danger of extreme rhetoric. The Speaker of the House of Representatives was among those condemning the shootings.
An attack on one who serves is an attack on all who serves. Such acts of violence have no place in our society. This inhuman act should not and will not deter us from our calling to represent our constituents and to fulfill our oaths of office. No act, no matter how heinous, must be allowed to stop us from our duty.
Well, some are already questioning whether vitriolic political discourse is to blame, including Sarah Palin's infamous campaign crosshairs map. It called for people in conservative districts to vote out of office Democrats who'd voted for President Obama's healthcare reform.
When the rhetoric about hatred, about mistrust of government, about paranoia of how government operates, and to try to inflame the public on a daily basis, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, has impact on people, especially who are unbalanced personalities to begin with.
Well, for her part, Sarah Palin has posted this message of condolence on her Facebook profile. On behalf of Todd and my family, it reads, "We all pray for the victims and their families and for peace and justice." Well, Prue Goward, it appears that the gunman, while obviously unhinged, held what could be considered, on some issues, to be right-wing beliefs, opposing federalism, calling a classmate who'd had an abortion a terrorist. He supported a return to the gold standard, which has been a hallmark of Tea Party policy, and he shot a Democrat in the end. It's not surprising that he is being characterised as a radical conservative, really, is it?
Well, in some ways, he's also a radical lefty. I mean, you know, he supports, I think, Adolf Hitler's policies, amongst other things. I think the real point is that this man is mentally ill. And I think it's incredibly dishonest of people to take this debate over and try and turn it into a debate about extreme language. I mean, Obama himself, the left, I mean, it's not uncommon in American politics for people on both sides to use extreme language. And you can't blame that. You can't blame this, in this case, you can't blame the rhetoric for the act of a very mentally ill person. I mean, I just think it's ridiculous. These
Even
things
as provocation?
No, I mean, mentally ill people have they march to a different drum, as we say. And I think it's very unfair to blame political discourse for something which inevitably happens in a free society where people can move around, including mentally ill people. And I think it's as simple as that. It's ridiculous to blame Sarah Palin. I mean, why not blame Obama for his comments that he's used and the sort of language that he's used, certainly in his election campaign, about taking them on and, you know, meeting a knife with a gun, that sort of rhetoric. Just as you might say violent, but that is not the issue. I think the issue is that in a free and open society, this tragically is occasionally going to happen.
Well, Antony, do you think that the tone of political discourse in the United States has been reasonable recently? And can I ask for a start, what do you make of Sarah Palin's prayer for the victims of the shooting?
She's covering her ass, I think, basically. Look, I disagree with Prue. I don't think one can say that Sarah Palin's at fault because of the killing. That's absurd and absolutely to say that. But if anyone spends any time reading and going to the States, reading the US press, reading a lot of prominent, particularly conservative commentators, not fringe players, mainstream Republicans, and, dare I say, some on other sides of politics as well. The rhetoric is inflammatory. It doesn't therefore mean that an individual goes out and kills someone. No, but the atmosphere that's created, I think, is central to that. And one of the things that comes up very clearly when you showed a clip before John Boehner, the new House of Representatives leader on the Republican side, many in his party are closely associated with politics, which directly talks about violence as a means to an end. I'm not suggesting John Boehner directly is involved either, or of course not. But it's impossible when one sees the rhetoric and reads the rhetoric in the US in the last few years. And we shouldn't forget that when Obama was elected 2 years ago now, a lot of people in the US, not all, but a sizable minority, fundamentally loathe the idea of an African-American man in charge of their country. Now, where this guy is part of that, we don't know. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But those realities are there, and for people to ignore that, I think, is ignoring the reality of the situation.
Well, let's look at one example of some of that rhetoric. Here is an example of the Conservative talk show host Glenn Beck speaking specifically about militia and Arizona in particular at a National Riflemen's Association meeting in May last year.
Do you know why do you know why Ben Franklin went door to door and said, grab your gun? You got a gun? Come on, Tom, go out in the, come on, we're going to march up and down the street. You know why that happened? Because the government wasn't doing their job. Let's talk a minute about a well-regulated militia and why you might need one because the government isn't doing their job. Let's meet people in Texas, Arizona, and California.
Conor Duffy, in the language of Glenn Beck and others, Liberals in America are routinely described as an evil and a cancer. He's one of the boosters of the Tea Party, obviously. America is used to political assassinations in the past, but has something changed in the political vernacular of America since the election of Barack Obama?
I certainly think the tone's gotten much more aggressive, and I think it's been a little bit frightening, actually. I remember the first time I saw Glenn Beck, I thought surely this must be some sort of fringe commentator, but he's a man who appeals to millions and who a lot of people respect. You've got that going on with commentators. You've also got it going on with politicians too. In the race in Nevada, which neighbours Arizona, was one of the most high profile in the midterm elections last year, and the Tea Party-backed Republican candidate there, Sharon Angle, appeared to suggest that militias were arming to overthrow the government. Now, while there's that rhetoric and that language is quite disturbing, I think it's also very hasty to link that to this shooting. The man who's been accused of the killing has a wide range of interest. We know that from his Facebook and MySpace pages. He was into the metal band Drowning Pool. He lists the Communist Manifesto as well as Mein Kampf as his books. I think what the clearest problem is the availability of guns in the United States. I mean, all through Europe you're seeing the rise of extremist party, but where people have access to rocks and sticks, the results are going to be a lot less deadly than when they've got semi-automatic Glocks.
And I think it's interesting that in America that is not the debate they're having.
It's an impossible debate to have, though.
That's right. Yes. So why don't we pick on the irrelevancies?
Well, can I ask, I mean, obviously there's going to be a discussion in the United States about community consultation. This was the kind of event that the Congresswoman was at. You're a politician here. Are there any those sorts of fears, the kind of mail that you'd get as an MP? And if not, I mean, does that underline the significance of the brave decision by a Conservative Prime Minister here, John Howard, in hauling back our gun laws?
Well, I think it's a very good evidence of very good support for John Howard's gun laws. Look, I agree. All MPs would get slightly threatening mail occasionally in Australia. There would not be anybody who doesn't. But the difference is guns. The difference is that in that country you can do something about somebody who upsets you, and if you have a mind to, put an end to their life. It's much more difficult here. And I do think that whilst there might have been an increase in that sort of violent rhetoric, political rhetoric, I think that's through all society. We are much more tolerant to violent language than we used to be, always looking for the more extreme metaphor. That's just a sign of these times. But I think it's an incredible step and an outrageously anti-intellectual step to then blame that on a man who is clearly mentally ill from doing what and blame him for doing what he did. Say no more.
To the Middle East, and Israel is being accused of today destroying any chance of renewed peace talks by ploughing on with demolitions in East Jerusalem. Part of the Hotel Shepherd complex is being, or has been, knocked down to be replaced by 20 new homes for Jewish settlers in the Sheikh Jarrah neighbourhood of East Jerusalem. US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has joined Palestinian groups in condemning the action, which she says undermines hopes for a two-state solution. Peace activist and former Israeli politician Mossi Raz agrees.
This is in Palestinian area, which is supposed to be part of the Palestinian state, part of the Palestinian capital state. This is an occupied Palestinian neighborhood. And this is a provocation of the settlers coming to the middle of the neighborhood to sit and to try to occupy this place.
Well, Antony, Bill Clinton at the time of the Camp David talks, which blew up, he was said to have an encyclopedic knowledge of Jerusalem and a map in his head of bridges and tunnels that was going to see a two-state solution possible, each side to have their part of the city linked that way. That was 10 years ago. Is it possible anymore to draw a line through Jerusalem? And if not, what does that say about the possibility of a two-state solution?
The irony, I think, about this latest Israeli demolition in East Jerusalem is Israel, by its own actions, is killing the two-state solution. In fact, has killed it dead. I mean, the argument can be made for 20 years now. There's been kind of an elaborate dance between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, with America kind of in the middle, siding with Israel every step of the way, to talk about a two-state solution. While settlements have more than doubled in size, settler groups have far more influence in the Israeli government, the Palestinian Authority is now essentially corrupt and complicit with the occupation itself. A viable two-state solution, in my view, for years has been impossible, utterly impossible. Can you divide the land? You can divide it in some non-viable way. Yes, you could do that. And one of the fears that many people have, including me, is that Obama, who's so desperate for some kind of success anywhere, frankly, but in the Middle East especially, will have a wonderful ceremony on the White House lawn. Israeli Prime Minister, Palestinian President, him in the middle, everyone shakes hands, everyone says, there you go, peace is done, thanks very much, see you later, when the truth is none of the issues will be resolved. So this latest thing, I mean, there is no peace process. There hasn't been a peace process, in my view, for 2 decades of any substance, because you can't have a peace process that continually colonises land. That's what's been going on for 2 decades, in fact 4 decades. But since the peace process, what we call, has continued, it has been a dance to allow settlements to continue to expand. So it's hard not to see this